We are now live.
22, 27. So, hello everyone. It is a great pleasure for us to welcome all you to this 18th International Conference on Business Process Management, the first fully virtual edition of VPN Conference Series. Let me start with a story. It was the year 2015 when we first presented our candidacy to organize VPN in Sevilla. For 5 years, we regularly reported the steering committee about the details of the organization. 5 updates in total. We knew each and every single detail on the conference by heart. In February, everything was ready to welcome all you. We even finished a VPN newsletter with the details about the conference in the conventional style. But then, the unexpected happened, and the COVID-19 pandemic spread all over the world, impacting in our lives in a significant manner. And of course, the VPN conference was not going to be different. In May, with the safety and well-being of our participants as our top priority, we made the difficult decision of putting the face mask on the VPN 2020 and moving the conference online. One of the things that we had clear is that we wanted to keep the same essence. This meant, on the one hand, that we were going to keep the dates and all the events that we had planned. The result was the program you can find now, with more than 125 talks and more than 350 authors. Of course, we know this is not enough, because it is difficult to recreate the atmosphere and the spontaneous encounters and collaboration that happen in the corridors of a physical conference. However, we have been working hard to design an exciting and interactive virtual conference, and we hope everyone can join together at the same time and share new research, ideas, and of course, engage in a lively discussion. Well, I give the floor to Manuel to comment on some of the details of the most attractive elements of the structure of this fully virtual VPN 2020 conference.
Well, thank you. Well, we have devised 3 main ways of interacting in the conference. First, like in a traditional conference, we will have the keynotes, tutorials, demos, and paper presentations organized in live sessions with the classical structures that includes both presentations and Q&A. And as you know, we are using Zoom for that. Just a quick recommendation. So if you want to get a better experience, we've noticed that it's best to use the Zoom client instead of the embedded client that you can find in Huba. If you want to open a presentation with the Zoom client, you just need to click on the open the live stream in the Zoom app link that is in each session. Also, you can find more tips and more advices about how to interact in the conference with this link and Zoom tips that you can find in the left-hand side of the web application. So, besides live sessions, a virtual conference opens up new opportunities of sharing content. So we have collected a pre-recorded presentation for each paper and made it available in the conference platform, as you know, a few days ago. The goal is to make it easier to watch some of the presentations, even if you cannot make it to the live session. Furthermore, each paper has a specific chat, so you can start a discussion with the author in an asynchronous way, enabling a sort of, let's say, flipped version of conference sessions. If you're curious, we have more than 20 hours of content, which is almost like 2 seasons of your favorite TV series. Finally, each of the authors will have a Zoom room available during one coffee break of the conference for answering questions about the paper. It's what we wanted to recreate. It's like when you approach the author during the coffee break to discuss about her talk. You can check the authors available for each coffee break on Huba. However, there are not only research sessions at BPM. We made an open call for virtual socials and mentoring sessions, and we finally choose 2 of each. So don't miss the virtual socials today after the sessions and join to talk about BPM for future. And on Wednesday, recording post BPM editions with well-known faces in the community. That's going to be great fun, I think. And especially for young researchers and students, don't miss the opportunity to participate in a small group mentoring session with either Dirk Fallan or Irene van der Vesten. Thanks a lot to both of you for offering to mentor sessions. And students can still sign up to the session before today, before 2 p.m. Before this mentoring session, there will be a general talk of each of them as well, so everyone can join that. We also know that it is hard to stay focused in a virtual conference, so to help you get ready and focused for a new BPM conference day, those of you who are interested can start each day, like today, with a short mindfulness session guided by a mindfulness expert. So every day, 20 minutes before the first session starts, you can focus yourself on the conference. You can also share, of course, your personal details on Huba and set up virtual meetups with other attendees, speakers, or sponsors. And also we, the organization team, will communicate with you and keep you updated through Huba. Finally, one of our major disappointments was not being able to let you enjoy your wonderful city. And this is something that we cannot achieve with these virtual means, but thanks to Adela and Haye, we are going to be able to show you a little bit of the city. They've been recording 10 short videos that we will play right at the beginning of each session of the research track and keynotes. And each video shows a different place of the city. Here comes an example of the first one. Let me, Adela.
I'm sharing my... Hello, we are Hayo and Adela. We are here on behalf of the whole BPM 2020 organization team. And since you cannot be here in Sevilla for this special occasion, we would like to bring you a taste of Sevilla, of our lovely city.
What we did is we recorded a number of videos of iconic sites throughout Sevilla. If you stick around and attend the different sessions, you will see all the clips. We're pretty sure that if you have seen all the clips, you really have a good idea how beautiful Sevilla videos.
You are on mute, Manuel.
So I was saying that this was a glimpse of the videos that you will find. However, to have some fun, we decided to also do something else, and we made a quiz about the videos. So during each of the breaks, and by the end of each conference day, there will be a question about the most recent video shown. You can find the question at the community forums. The first ones to answer will get some points, and at the end of the conference, the attendees with more points will win the Grand Sevilla Quiz Prize. And in the closing session, we will announce the winner's name and prize together with the other less relevant awards that the conference gives, like a BPM Dissertation Award, or Best Paper Award, Best Student Paper Award, or Best Demo Session. So don't miss the awards and closing session on Thursday at 3:50 p.m. We'll also have a glimpse of the next edition of BPM at Rome. And finally, we didn't want to finish without giving the thanks to some people. First of all, we want to thank all the attendees. We have now on Huba more than 1,450 attendees from 86 different countries. So definitely this is a huge advantage of virtual conferences. Of course, we also want to thank all the chairs who did a tremendous effort to adapt to the difficult circumstances and made it really easy for us to transition to online. We want also to thank all those people who submitted papers to the conference, and of course, those who reviewed them. And I want to especially mention the authors who did the effort of doing this pre-recorded presentation that you can find in Huba. Also, big thanks to the sponsors and partners who supported us in this difficult edition. Don't miss the virtual booths in Huba. They have videos, they have handout materials, you can chat with them, and also have one-on-one talks. And they're not gonna play only a passive role at the conference, but they have a device, a program that will take place during lunch and coffee breaks and after the sessions, with several demos, panels, live presentations, and it's a really great program. So yes, please check it out in the SP agenda, in the resources, in the web page. You can also find it here in the web application. And to conclude, I want to express my gratitude to all the BPM organization team. There is a group at the University of Seville for making all this possible. And that's all from our side. Now we give the floor to Matthias Veske, who's going to give us a message from the steering committee.
Yeah, thank you very much, Manuel. Hello, everybody. So on behalf of the steering committee, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the 18th International Conference on Business Process Management, and a very warm welcome to all first-time BPM participants. I would have loved to welcome you in person in Sevilla, but as we have just heard, this year is different. It is different because we cannot meet in person, we cannot enjoy the fabulous environment of southern Spain, we cannot attend the welcome reception nor the conference dinner. But in other aspects, BPM this year is not that different. We again have an outstanding scientific program, an excellent organization that really adapted to the new format of the conference, and we do have many chances for social but virtual interactions. So please join me in giving a big hand to the persons who made that possible. BPM 2020 General Chairs Antonio Ruiz Cortez and Manuel Resinas, and PC Chairs Marlon Dumas, Dirk Falland, Chiara Ghedini, and Jörg Becker. So a big round of applause for you for your hard work that you did in the previous months and over the years, as we have even heard in the beginning. But in a conference like BPM, there are many more people involved, like the PC members, the organization committee, the various conference chairs, and also the chairs of co-located events and forums. and of course the sponsors. So on behalf of the steering committee, thank you very much for your support. On this occasion, I have to share with you very sad news. So earlier this year, our dear colleague Florian Daniel passed away. Florian was a PC chair at BPM 2013, and he was a BPM workshop chair on 2 other occasions. So we will all remember Florian as an important member of our community and also simply as a very nice guy. As chairperson of the steering committee, I want to report on changes in the composition of the steering committee. We have welcomed 2 new members, and these are very well known and also respected members of the BPM community. And these individuals are Michael Roseman of the Queensland University of Technology and Hajo Reyes of the University of Utrecht in the Netherlands. So thanks to Michael and Hajo for accepting our invitation. It's really wonderful to have you in the steering committee. Let's now take a glimpse forward. So next year we will be in Rome for BPM 2021, which is organized by Massimo Mecella and his team of Roman gladiators. We all do hope for a physical BPM. I'm happy to report that the plans are on track, and we have already appointed an excellent team of PC chairs, and also the website is out, and also the call for papers is out, so please have a look. Finally, I'd like to take the opportunity to announce the venue of BPM 2022. BPM 2022 will take place in Münster in Germany, and it will be organized by Jörg Becker and his team at the Erzis Institute, University of Potsdam. All right, so that's basically what I wanted to say. Thank you very much for attending BPM 2020 and have a wonderful conference.
Okay, so I am the coordination chair of the program committee of this conference. We have shared the various tracks of the conference together with Dirk Fachland, Chiara Ghirini, and Jörg Becker. And I would like to kind of take 4 or 5 minutes of your time to give you a bit of a tour of the things that happen under the hood in order to prepare the research and innovation program of the conference. So as is the tradition with the BPM conference, the preparations start, way more than 10 months before, with some initial call for workshops and call for tutorials, followed by a call for papers for the research and innovation program of the conference. This year, and even though the COVID outbreak happened right during the week when we had our conference deadline, we received 138 submissions, which is about 10% less than usual, but that's kind of pretty normal given the circumstances. Distributed across the 3 tracks of the main research and innovation track of the conference. The first track is the foundations track, which deals with more computer science methods, where we received 32 submissions. The second one is the engineering track, where we deal more with information systems engineering methods, and that received 50 papers. And the management track, where people submit papers related to management aspects of BPM, where we received 56 submissions. And this is a little bit in line with what has been the trend in the past few years. And it shows that, there are 3 sub-communities in our conference, ranging from more technical side to more management and social aspect sides that coexist very nicely and that bring the interdisciplinary nature to the conference. Out of those, we moved 125 papers into a peer review process that then led to 27 papers being accepted in the main conference. So these are the BPM research sessions that you will see in your conference program. So it consists of 27 paper presentations. plus 19 papers that we move into the so-called BPM forum, which is a separate section of the conference that we reserve for papers that have a strong innovation potential. For example, they propose some new concepts, new architectures, new techniques, or to solve emerging problems. And there are 19 papers in there, which you will find in your program under the BPM forum sessions. In addition to that, and I will not mention it due to lack of time, there is a whole set of other tracks in the conference, demo sessions, etc. So in numbers, we want to thank the 42 senior PC members that led the discussions that happened during the peer review process. We want to thank the 104 program committee members who volunteered to review the papers submitted to the main track of the conference and who participated in the robust debates that we had, which was driven by which led to 503 paper reviews being written, out of which 125 by the senior PC members and the rest by the regular PC members, and some reviews also written by some additional reviewers. We had some discussions following those reviews, consisting of 880 comments. So when you get a rejection letter and you get some comments, I mean, bear in mind that behind those comments there has been quite a lot of discussion happening. Sometimes the comments are lengthier than the reviews themselves. So there is a lot of thought that is going into the selection of research papers. That has led to two volumes, one in the series LSCS, which is the main conference proceedings, the research part, and the other one is the Business Process Management Innovation Forum, so the other 19 papers that you will find under the BPM Forum section of your program. In addition to these papers, which are all just the tip of the iceberg of all the research and thinking that has been going into the program of this conference, there are pointers from the papers in these two volumes to more than 30 supplementary open science artifacts that includes research prototypes or scripts or code or Python notebooks, data sets, etc., with interviews and results of surveys and so on, that the authors have made available together with their papers. This is the first year in the conference where we had explicitly, we evaluated as part of the review process the presence of open science artifacts to support every research paper. And we are very happy that more than 2/3 of the accepted papers have supplementary open science material, which we invite you to consult if you want to dig deeper into the research or you want to try out the research prototypes that back some of the papers in the conference proceedings. Small spoiler, in the closing ceremony, we will give a Best Paper Award, and naturally it will go to a paper which is a perfect example of how to do your supplementary open source artifacts, in addition to being an outstanding paper on its own. We're going to have in total then 46 paper presentations, including the ones in the BPM Innovation Forum, and we're going to have during the week tons of demos and artifact sessions, industry forum papers, including lots of case studies, the RPA forum, which is a separate forum specifically for papers in the field of RPA, and the similar for the blockchain forum. Yesterday we had 6 workshops, and the day before we had a doctoral consortium. So it's a very packed week. At the center of the conference program, and one of the highlights of the conference program is that we have 3 keynote speakers. Abigail, who will talk in a few minutes about minding the big data gap in the field of process mining. Rama Akiraju from IBM tomorrow, who will talk in the afternoon. Exceptionally, keynotes are normally in the morning, but Rama Akiraju is in California, so we kind of didn't want to wake her up at 2 o'clock in the morning. So she will be talking late in the afternoon about infusing AI into business processes. And on Thursday, we'll have Jan von Brocke talking about the rise of the concept of process science and of the job description process scientist. So we look forward to these 3 talks. Just before we move into the first keynote, a special thanks to the 2 people at the center of this organization, Manuel Resinas and Antonio Ruiz Cortez, and of course to all their wonderful organization team behind them for putting together this conference in such difficult circumstances. And without further ado, I leave the screen to Dirk Fachland, who will introduce Abigail for the first keynote. So Dirk, you can take the screen. Oh, sorry, Abigail, you can take the screen.
Avi takes the screen, I take the audio. Thank you very much, Marlon. Well, now it's time for me to be nervous. Never had such a large screencast to such a large audience. So welcome everybody to the first keynote session of the BPM conference. And it's a true honor to introduce our first keynote speaker, Avigal, which has been with the BPM conference for a very, very long time already. I think its first, well, publication at least was in 2005, so over 15 years ago. Avi, I met you 10 years ago in New York when we were cruising around Manhattan on a boat, which was very nice. And now I can bridge the gap a bit to you. You're not only present at the BPM conference, you're also very much home in the database world and also in the AI world. So, and we've seen AI becoming a very important topic in the conference yesterday with the AI for BPM workshop and also tomorrow's keynote. Your work is always around everything that concerns processes, data, performance, queuing networks, all these kinds of things. And in your abstract, you note that process mining specifically originated in a small data world when there was little data available. I always remember the sayings by Will van der Aalst. When they started process mining, there wasn't even data. So they just had to create synthetic data. And now we're in a big data world. And what this is all about, this will be your presentation. I'm very curious to hear what you have to say. One remark to all attendees: when we approach the question and answer part of this keynote, please use the Q&A chat, which is a separate button at the bottom of your Zoom screen to enter your question. I will read the questions to Avi if you post them there, or you can raise your hand in the attendees panel. I will see that, and then I can ask you to unmute you. So Avi, may I ask you to start your presentation?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dirk, for the warm words. I really appreciate it. Hello, everybody. So yeah, my name is Avigal. I come from the Technion in Israel. And I was trained as a database researcher. And as Dirk mentioned correctly, since 2005, I did find BPM and process mining to be my home, not a home away from home, but an actual home. And I'm very happy for the opportunity that was given to me here. Now, you may be wondering about the title. Maybe I made a typo when I say process mining, but no, that was the full intention. We need to mine the process, and we need to close the big data gap. And I'm going to share with you some of my thoughts on the topic. So I was asked to talk about the animal kingdom. So here I am talking about the lion and the mouse. And I would like to introduce to you Matt the lion, which from now on we will nickname ML. I also want to introduce Petra the mouse, which will be nicknamed PM. And it turns out there is a fable about them. So I'm going to share the fable with you for those of you who are not familiar with it. So a lion lay asleep in the forest, his great head resting on his paws. A timid little mouse came upon him unexpectedly, and in her fright and haste to get away, ran across the lion's nose. Roused from his nap, the lion laid his huge paw angrily on the tiny creature to kill her. "Spare me," begged the poor mouse. "Please let me go, and someday I will surely repay you." The lion was much amused to think that a mouse could ever help him, but he was generous and finally let the mouse go. Some days later, while stalking his prey in the forest, the lion was caught in the toils of a hunter's nets. Unable to free himself, he filled the forest with his angry roaring. The mouse knew the voice and quickly found the lion struggling in the nets. Running to one of the great ropes that bound him, she gnawed it until it parted. And soon the lion was free. "You laughed when I said I would repay you," said the mouse. "Now you see that even a mouse can help a lion." So what is the moral? Well, the other moral. ML actually started as a very small research community within a little bit larger AI community. You would have in the main conferences something about 800 participants per year. And then big data strike. And all of a sudden, ML became mixed up with the real world. So all of a sudden, you have to provide tools for actual humans to work on. All of a sudden, your core applications and core technology found themselves into each and every application that people use. And ML was completely unprepared for this. And now we need to think about what can PM do for ML. And that's going to be the main topic of this talk. But let me first make sure that we're all on the same page. So just a little bit about what is this big data that got ML so tangled up. And big data can be characterized, and typically this is characterized by a few words in the English language that starts with the letter V. And the first one will be the volume. So obviously we all know that big data is big. So there is a lot of data, and as Dirk mentioned correctly, when BPM started, the world was much smaller, at least in terms of data. Another V is that of velocity, that represents the how fast the data actually comes and goes, but also it tells us a story about how data keeps on changing. The third V is called variety, and this is where we need to tackle data that comes from multiple sources, each one being generated with a different flavor. And finally, we have veracity, which is basically the truthfulness of the data. And while sometimes a lion is just a lion, in other cases, a lion can be something a little bit different. So these are the four V's. Now, data, as we came to understand, works through a life cycle. And this life cycle typically starts by gathering. So there is a gathering of data from those multiple sources, bringing them together. The managing part will be the part where you actually look at the data, integrate it, store it in a place where you can later on deal with it. Then comes analyzing the data, where you actually try to get some insights out of the data. And finally, there is some explaining to do. You have to tell other people, you have to tell other machines what you got from this data. And typically this explanation raises new questions. And with new questions, we basically start the cycle of data all over again in gathering. Okay, so we know a little bit about the big data. We know the data lifecycle. And we also know that ML is entangled with the world, as it must be. And PM has a possible answer. And the unique features that PM can bring to the table, well, one of them is analyzing timestamp data. Working with processes, we must know what is the order of activities, so we know how to deal with data that is timestamped. People in the community were quick to catch on the latest machine learning algorithm, and we can definitely train the people in process mining and the people in BPM how to deal with state-of-the-art machine learning algorithms. But if this was it, then there was nothing much to discuss, and we may have been just like any other community that jumps on the machine learning wagon and simply offering different ways of how to use it. But in my opinion, this is the main important part. Remember that process mining was born in the world of BPM. And the world of BPM, from its very origin, had the human in the loop. And this actually has impact on everything that we do in process mining. And we need to remember that when we go out to the world and try to save ML from its entangling network. So if nothing else, this is like the main message that I have here. Human in the loop, state of mind is what really makes PM different and unique. Okay, so let's try and think, what are these three sharp teeth that process mining has to offer for the world? And this goes along the typical textbook partition. So we start with discovery. And when we talk about discovery, as I will elaborate a little bit later on, we actually talk about explainability. By discovering a process, we explain the data to the world in a way that people will understand what was the process that generated the data behind it. When we use conformance, then basically we put humans in the loop. And again, this will be the second topic that I will discuss, how we basically take humans and put them in a different role than they were conceived in areas such as machine learning. And finally, when we talk about enhancements, then this is where perspectives comes into play. And this is the feature engineering, which is really a painful aspect to process mining. For ML. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these three topics, try to shed some light about how they are in common or different from machine learning. And I'm going to start with discovery. And I know I don't need to explain why I start with discovery, but anyway, this is not because discovery is the first chapter in the textbook, but because discovery is actually the most similar task that we have in process mining to machine learning. So we can position discovery as a machine learning task. The input is basically a sample of training data. Now, training data in process mining has a unique feature. Remember, we're talking about process and timestamps. So when we create a log to be analyzed, we typically look for at least the following three: the who, the what, and the when. So the who is the case ID for us. The what is the activity, and the when is the timestamp. Beyond that, we can add more stuff, and we'll talk about that later on. But right now, these are the three main elements that we want to have. And the output would be a mathematical model. So for us, this mathematical model is a process. Typically, we use Petri nets to represent this, this model, but we can also use other graphical means and so on. Okay, so we know about the input, and we know about the output. But here comes a very important question. Why discover? So if you pose this question to a machine learning researcher or engineer, you need to have a reason to build your model. And this reason is a task. For example, it can be a classification. Maybe you want to separate a regular loan from a mortgage. Or it can be a clustering task. Let's put similar traces together. Or it can be for prediction. How long will I stay in the system? But coming from a process mining point of view, we don't necessarily think so. So nobody does discovery just for the sake of discovery. But when we do discovery, we don't necessarily have in mind the specific task that the revealed model will be used for. So sometimes the discovery we can think of more as the visual analytics in the data lifecycle. So the first task that you have to do, and we keep on teach that to our data science students, the first task is to get a look and feel of the data. You can't just rush, put the data into one of your favorite black box machines and expect to get useful outcome. It never works this way. So discovery is a little bit like machine learning, but with a different intention in mind. And this intention, again, goes back to the human in the loop state of mind. Because when we discover a process, usually we show it to somebody. We explain the process. And afterwards, we can do whatever we want to do with it. But you will not find this coming from a machine learning practitioner. Okay, so let's try and put it also, continue and put it in the machine learning terms when we think about whether this is a supervised task, unsupervised, semi-supervised, weakly supervised, and anything in between. So what do we really have when we get a log? So a log is a representation of all those activities that took place in the history that we're using. So in that case, we can parallel it to a machine learning task when you use only positive examples, okay? We don't put things that did not happen in the log. We just use things that happened. So this is only positive examples. In that sense, we can think of the log as being, as the task as being as unsupervised, but only with positive examples. But we also put in the log, when we transfer the log from the original data into the who, what, and when, we actually put a little bit of supervision. We call the activities by their names. Sometimes we need to aggregate low-level events into some kind of an activity that a human can understand. So as a designer of a discovery process, I already supervise the process, the task of discovery by putting some of my, let's call it, biases into the system. So again, we cannot fall into the typical supervised versus unsupervised classification of machine learning. Okay, now one thing just to keep in mind is that true, we use the who, what, and when, but what happens if we don't have it? For example, what happens when we lose the what? The data is all of a sudden sensor data from a sensor world. The activities have no meaning in humans' world. How do we actually transform that? And this is a challenge of the low-level to high-level events that people in the community have been working on. And but then again, let's continue and think what happens once you lose the who, the case ID. How do we regenerate it? How do we regenerate ordering if we don't have it? All of these are interesting questions that we can research within our community and also put forward to the world. Okay, when we talk about discovery, and when we on our way to conformance, there is always the issue of evaluation. So let's try and see what's the similarities and differences between machine learning and process mining when we talk about evaluation. So in machine learning, we roughly separate the evaluation based on whether we are using a regressor or a classifier. When we use a regression, we use measures like the mean squared error, the root mean squared error, and the median relative absolute error, basically telling us how far are we from the truth. When we use classification, which is a binary task, we use measures like the confusion matrix and some of its derivatives, the accuracy, the precision, the recall, F measure, and so on. We're all familiar with that. Now, what about process mining? So process mining typically has these 4 measures that we use, or 4 dimensions to evaluate our models. So the first one is fitness, basically telling us how good of a fit is the model to the data that we have for training. And this is very similar to recall. There is the precision, which obviously is similar to precision. And the generalization is another variation of that we can take from the confusion matrix. But obviously, in the PM research, we were not satisfied with these 3 measures. We also had a 4th one, which is called simplicity. And this seems like, you know, the one that we neglect the most. Some try to do some formalizations of it. There are multiple ways of explaining what is simplicity. But if you look at this, the last and you know, almost forgotten dimension that we have, and you put it together with the fact that we have a human in the loop state of mind, then we understand why do we need simplicity. We need simplicity for explainability. We need simplicity for interoperability. What does it mean? So we need to be able to tell somebody why the model looks as it does. And we need to be able to tell somebody what were the most important elements that affect the model, okay? So think of explainability as something that has to, or simplicity as something that has to do with how many activities we have on a screen for a process. So we are concerned presenting a model with fewer nodes, but still understandable to humans. And we do that because the way that we present our discovery outcome is as a way to explain it to somebody else. The same is if we do the low level to high level, we want to make sure that the activities are given in the right terms, in the right hierarchy, so people can understand it. So don't forget the simplicity and use it as a new measure if you want to hit the and help ML in trying to get untangled, because it is the simplicity that will make sure that some human will understand better what you're trying to say. Okay. Now, what is missing in process mining right now is the part of the regression. So within these 4 dimensions, they are all aimed at some sort of a classification. Are we correct? Are we incorrect? But in general, we also need to think about the world as being non-binary. So there is a room to add more measures of success, looking at the different regression measures and trying to understand in what sense do they fit in our discovery. Perhaps our discovery becomes uncertain, and then we can think of probabilities of possible worlds and so on. And in all of these, we will need some kind of non-binary evaluation, and this is where the regression can fit more into the process mining community. Okay, so I've covered discovery and I talked about evaluation, and evaluation also leads me to conformance. Now, remember what I try to do here is try to parallel machine learning and process mining and see the commonalities and differences. And something that was very easy for me to do in discovery is a little bit harder when it comes to conformance. Now, when we think of conformance in process mining, one of the use cases, the typical use cases, is that of, okay, you discovered a model from the data. Now, does it fit any known model that was already given to you by a human expert? True, there are different variations, but you know, when I try to explain to people what conformance is, this is how I do that. You have one model that was discovered, one model that was given to you, and you try to see whether they fit together. Now, machine learning also has a notion of conformance if we think about model fitting. So you generated a model, you look back at the data that you used to create the model, and you say to what extent the model fits the data that you have created. So it may be overfit, or it may be underfit. It can be generalized or not. But note the language. The language is about a model versus data set, okay, versus the test data that you used on top of it. Now, in process mining, we also compare models to data, but not directly. We kind of abstract the data into another model, and we do this kind of comparison of a model versus a model, okay? And for us, this is a mechanism for understanding whether the data is noisy. Perhaps the model that we use is no good anymore, and people decided to take shortcuts. Maybe I can identify where are the loopholes of this data, and so on. None of this you will see in the machine learning literature. The machine learning literature basically looks at the performance aspects, okay? So this leads me to some thoughts about, okay, so we have models. Machine learning has models. The models in machine learning are basically looked upon as a vehicle for efficiency. Is this the same for us in process mining? So not exactly, as you probably could guess. So I'll try to talk about two elements here when it comes to models. And the first one is what we call black box models. Black box models are models that are given input and generate the output that is needed from them. The output may be about predicting something, classifying correctly a picture, identifying the parameters, and so on. Now, when you look at the box as a black box, you don't really see what's going on inside. And therefore, interpreting the results may be a hard task. Now, if you come from a small community that does work that aims at performance, then it may be okay. But now imagine that you run a startup, okay? And let's say that this startup is about predicting whether a person will be infected with the virus in the next 2-3 days. I don't know why this is needed, but probably some people think that this is an important task. And then you come to an HMO and you present your algorithm. And you manage to show that you are correct 90% of the time. There will still be the doctor that will say, but why this happens this way? And if you don't have the answer, most likely your startup will not get the contract. Now, people in the machine learning community understand that. And the way to handle it is usually by giving anecdotal results or trying very hard to do interpretation. But this interpretation is tricky because on the one hand, you want to show people something new that they haven't thought about before. On the other hand, if you show them something that is so far off from the mental understanding of the problem, then they will consider the process or the model that you created to be unusable because you cannot really relate to it. And here I'm talking in terms of psychology, on cognitive thinking. How do I fit my model, not to the data, but to the state of mind of the human being that looks at the model? Okay, so that's one issue with black box models when you try to evaluate a new model that you created from data. The other element is about hyperparameter tuning. Now, this is a real pain because when you build a model, it would be easier if you just let the machine do everything and get the data and get your prediction out of the way. But any beginner in data science that gets the first task understands that without tuning some hyperparameters, and a hyperparameter is simply a fancy word now for these variables that we need to actually put into place in order to get some useful result. So how do you tune hyperparameters? You can tune them to be efficient, or if you have human in the loop state of mind, you tune your parameters in a way that the humans can understand. So the parameters themselves need to be understandable. You need to interpret the hyperparameters, and you need to tune it in a way that the model will make sense. You can start by tuning it in a way that will show obvious results to get some trust in the model. And then you change it a little bit to show that other things can come into play. Now, this is a cognitive trick, right? You start from the place where people know and then move them to the place where you want them to be. And that's interesting because we're using hyperparameters in a totally different way than machine learning can think about it. Okay, so human in the loop tuning is so much better than efficiency tuning. Okay, and here is another story that I can tell you. Imagine that you train a neural network that clearly people think about as a black box model. And you train it and you get good results. And let's say that you train it to predict a value between 0 and 1. And you get good results and you can show it to the manager and the manager will be happy with it. But then you look at the prediction that the machine does. It turns out that the prediction is always 0.5, regardless of whether the answer is 0.4 or 0.6. Some people see that as a failure. I see that as a way to explain the model to humans. Because if you show a human his data, her data, and you tell them, look, the machine was smart enough to choose the middle road and tell you that 0.5 is the best estimation, what does that tell you in your application? How should we change the model or the process in order to work in such a way that we can separate better the 0.4 from the 0.6? Okay, I think I got carried away with this tuning stuff, but it's really interesting, at least for me. So one of the takeaway points from here is that think of hyperparameters as tuning for the humans rather than tuning for efficiency. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about the last part, which is the model enhancement. There's a lot of text here, but it's basically the basic definitions. So we think about process enhancement. This is the extension or improvement of an existing process model using information about the actual process recorded in some event log. Typically, many of us work on process extension in a big data world, which is a form of process enhancement where a priori model is extended with a new aspect or perspective. I didn't put the citation here. This is from, textbook material. So thanks all of you that write those textbooks that you can use. Now, the big data is the place where enhancements could grow, because big data offers, in addition to the who, what, and when, additional contextual data about resources, about costs, and so on. So model enhancement is really good when we come to speak about big data. Now, let's see again the comparison with machine learning. So when we talk about enhancement, in many cases, we talk about, okay, so we add a new perspective to the data and we use it. So in machine learning terms, basically, we talk about feature engineering. And basically, we take the process, feature engineering is the process of using domain knowledge to extract features from raw data via data mining techniques, okay? And then we use these features to improve the performance of machine learning algorithms. Now, remember, and we've done this trick a few times already, let's think about human in the loop state of mind. Why do we need this new perspective? Well, this new perspective is basically gathering information from an expert. So we are the experts of processes. We know about the who, what, and when, but we are not domain experts. So perspectives are domain experts' way of telling us what is more important than others. And this is feature engineering. Basically, we need to choose the most important from the less important. So if you tackle it from a machine learning point of view, feature engineering is just a word. You just say, I need the data, and let's see what kind of data works. And then you run into situations of models that are poorly designed, that have overflow of data that you cannot use at the end. But if you have a human in the loop state of mind, then think of enhancement and choosing a perspective as part of the data gathering in the life cycle of data. You go back to the roots. You ask the expert, what is really important? What you're not sure about, and give me one or two features that you are completely certain that has no impact. And then you build it together into the model, you run it, and either you confirm whatever the expert told you, or you give some new unexpected result out of it. Either way, you will get the expert smiling. It may be a surprise, or it may be confidence, but you get them to smile. Okay. Another part may be, another way of looking at it is, rather than looking at the feature, we just look for the data. We want to choose data for better enhancement. So we can say the model was not trained good enough, I need more data. But this type of need more data can also be quantified. For example, I can say, I need more data that shows what is a good result and what is a bad result. Please don't give me data in the gray area in between. And when you do that, you can direct the model into better learning. And think of that as, you can come to class and blurb a lot about many things, but typically we have some way that in a disciplinary way, we bring the students from point A to point B. Think of the model as, or your trained model as being your student, that you need to train them and bring them from point A to point B. Again, this is about data gathering. I must tell you at this point that people that do pure machine learning, they forget about any of the 4 steps that I mentioned, the gathering, the management, and the explanation, and stick with analysis. The fact that you're a good analyzer is not enough. You have to be a good gatherer, a good manager, and a good explainer. And this is what we try to teach our students. Okay, so at this point, I shared the thoughts about the similarities and differences between process mining and machine learning. Just give me 1 second. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Sorry. I was under the impression if somebody can just give me a ping saying that you heard what I said so far.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay,
It's all
okay.
good, Avi.
Thank you, because it seems my camera kind of turned off by itself at some point.
No, it's all good. Keep on
yeah.
going. We're curious what you want to say.
Thank you. So, and you also see the slide, just follow a yellow brick road, right?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I'm coming to the basically to the last part of my talk here. And when I say just follow a yellow brick road, that means that there are many yellow brick roads. Don't be afraid to choose one. There is no one single yellow brick road that you need to choose. Basically, we have at our disposal in this, this time and place, lots of new technologies that we can use. For example, Internet of Things. Internet of Things are providers of data. For example, cloud computing. Cloud computing can provide us with the facility to store data, do not hesitate to store data, and to manipulate it in many different ways. Now, we also have new and exciting applications, and for that we really need to thank ML, that while roaring to the world, got a lot of attention, and a lot of people started to use machine learning as part of it. So we can think of healthcare logistics, luggage handling systems, software analysis, smart maintenance, website analytics, customer journey, and on and on and on. Now, the use of application is good as a motivation for our own research. It gives us the new questions that we want to ask. And the most important thing that we have now is that new needs. So machine learning needs explainability and interpretability. And this is something that the students that come and research in process mining and process management have it as part of the education. It comes very naturally. So we can continue and think of that. And this is something that we can push to the rest of the world. So just as a small promo, if you come to our tutorial on Thursday, we will give one such example of how process can be used for interpretation and explainability. Okay, but any of those yellow brick roads have gaps, and we need to be careful about those gaps. So to start off, be very professional. You should know your stuff well. You come from a community that has theory and practice mixed together. Know your theory and know your practice when you preach it to the world. Identify a gap in research, and a good way to look at it is to find the human in the loop aspect that is missing in current research in AI or in machine learning. Finally, it's very useful to have an interdisciplinary team. So the team should have multiple ways of thinking. It doesn't have to be just process miners. It can be also data scientists. It can be management people. It can be lawyers. It can be domain experts if you're interested in one specific domain. Interdisciplinary, whether you meet virtually or you meet physically, this is a very strong point when you can push a research forward. And with that, I conclude. Thank you very much. And please mind the fact that process mining is the new explainable AI. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Avi. And now we all have to imagine a roaring applause from over 230 attendees. You did something very nice here. And we already have received several questions, and I see hands going up. Hayo asked the first question in the chat, and Hayo, I will just give you the opportunity to ask your question yourself. If I find you quick enough in the list. There you are. So Hayo, I'm allowing you to talk to ask your question to Avi, which I think fits very well.
Thank you very much, Dirk. Avi, I really enjoyed your keynote. I'm trying to say to myself a couple of times the human in the loop state of mind. I'm getting better at it. So I refer to Hittelsum. That's the acronym for it. So this Hittelsum mood, does that apply, in your opinion, does it apply to the analysis side of business process management? Because I see in the discipline that we are also very hard trying to get the human out of the loop in all kinds of aspects. When you look at robotic process automation, we are trying to get tedious things out of processes in terms of execution. Or when we look at how we create event logs, we are trying to minimize all the efforts that people have to put in creating these event logs. So how do you look at that part of the human in the loop? Is that
right?
A different part, or is it, can you clarify that, please?
Okay. Thanks. So to start with, we're playing in the research arena, and there's nothing that we are not allowed to do. So we're free to take the human out of the loop, and we're free to bring the human back in the loop and play back and forth depending on what we're trying to show at some point. So clearly, getting the human out of the loop in some task may be a good idea. Sometimes even getting politicians out of the loop may save the world. But going back to research, back and forth between human in the loop and out of the loop, what I would like to point here is that not all humans are created alike, okay? The same way that there are stupid algorithms and smart algorithms, there may be humans that are more aware of the domain and less aware of the domain. There may be experts that will be able to provide you information in one sense, and others that will provide you information in different senses. So you can use humans as long as you use them smartly. So humans may have their own biases in the way that they provide information to you.
Yes.
The one bias that we see is with feature engineering, because experts, you need to drive them to tell you about some things that you think that are not, that they think that they are not important when you try to reveal something from the data. And so you need to push them beyond their limits of what they know.
Right.
So we need the human in the loop. And my point here was also that with human in the loop, we can make explainable AI better coming from our community. But we also need to take the human out of the loop in some tasks.
Yes. Very clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next in line is Simon Cope, who raised his hand already halfway through the presentation. So Simon, I'm sharing the microphone with you.
Sorry, that was by accident. I didn't.
That was by accident. All right, no worries. Thanks for responding. Then the next question we have is from Massimo Coletti. Massimo, I think it's best if you ask your question in person. Let me see that I find you in the participant list. Massimo. There you are. Because I think it's a very interesting one.
Yes, hi. My question was that we're talking about gathering data and process models that we have to discover or check. But behind the business process models and data, there is the process model that is buried within the applications. So usually in the real world, we deals with the ERP system or other kind of applications, and each of them has their own process model within that limit us, for example, to perform some transactions only when another previous transaction was completed or released or so on. And so I would like to have your point of view, your opinion about this process in the middle situation between the business perspective and the data in the system.
Okay. Thank you. For me, and again, this may be you know, kind of a biased point of view. When I think about what you call here the ERP process model, it's very similar to the process model that is given by an expert, only it's given in a written form. So I think of those ERP companies, they have their own experts to design their own processes. And this process is kind of an input to the system. And then, you know, we can do conformance on top of it. We can do enhancements to it. It's interesting in the context of machine learning because in machine learning terms, we need to think about having already a model in place, and then let's say a model for time delay. And then I'm using it to see whether the data actually corresponds to that. And I realized that it doesn't. So we can do some maybe drift analysis in order to understand to what extent we are further away from the model. So this goes back to my evaluation point that I made about data, which is evaluation measures that are non-binary. So basically drift analysis becomes a non-binary aspect. It's not either you're there or out, but to what extent you're far away from the original models. But I also think, and you know, maybe I need to think it a little bit further, how do we approach in a machine learning terms a situation where there is a model, and maybe even this model is fixed, right? So there is regulations, you're not allowed to change the regulations, but what do you do in machine learning? How do you learn a model when you put on these regulations? You put them as constraints and so on. You need to think about interactive ways of going back to the decision makers in order to make it work. I think it can be a new way of thinking when you try to bring it into the to the machine learning world.
Many thanks.
Thank you for the question. Next one is Jan Martijn. Jan Martijn, I'm unmuting you.
Yeah, Avi, many thanks for your talk. The question that I often get if I do process mining and show some models is that people typically ask, how certain are you that it is this model or that it's not another model? And for ML, there are some types of certainty about the models, but for process mining, that's always very difficult. So do you have any opinions about this? How could you do this?
Yeah, so thank you. This is an excellent question, which means that I have some opinion on that. Thank you. Yes, I mean, when we talk about models, then obviously one way of working with them is to find multiple models and rank them. And it goes back to my point about hyperparameters. So typically what I can do is I can take a model and then I can switch the knob until I get the best result. But the best result on the trained data may overfit. So I need to release a little bit to get a little bit more of generalization. We have actually all of these terms in processes. What probably will be interesting for us as a community is to think about possible worlds, possible models living in different possible worlds, ranking the models, and not just ranking, but also saying to what extent they fit or do not fit with the data that we have at hand and the data that we anticipate to get. So we have multiple perspectives, research going on already, and obviously this is one direction. I would like to see effective ways of ranking models. And again, this goes back to the human in the loop, because we need to go to the decision maker and tell them, you know, this is the best model that you get, but if you're not satisfied with this or the other parameter, we can take it out, but then your model will be 10% worse. Is this something that you can live with? Is this something that you think that will be more appropriate? And so on. So presenting more than one model, I think it's a good way to identify with the decision maker what is the best model to be used.
Yeah, thanks a lot. The question that I then have is, how do you see different worlds? Because, well, we just have positive data.
Right. So that's a very good question. So one thing from that we need to think is how to take from the machine learning world also negative data. So if you think about models that are more along the lines of declare models, then basically you can think of generating negative data by violating constraints. And then you need to think about an orderly fashion of creating a log that will not bias you towards one direction or the other. In the database world, there are some tools about it, and basically how to generate all the wrong answers that you can get in an orderly fashion. And maybe some of the techniques there can be borrowed to here. But an immediate way of creating multiple worlds is by changing hyperparameters. And we change hyperparameters by making sense of the parameters and changing them in a way that decision makers will be able to understand.
Thanks a lot.
Yep, thank you, Jan Martijn. We have another question from Christian Janisch, which kind of goes a bit in the same direction. So I'll give the floor to Christian.
Hi, thank you for this interesting talk. We're doing quite a bit of research on how people perceive explanations and what kind of explanations work in which settings. Now, my question is, do we need process-specific augmentations, or can we go with what we already have? Because a lot of the newer process prediction techniques, for example, are based on black box models, where it's very hard to extract any meaning unless you use certain augmentations.
Right. So for me, that's the next frontier, the next challenge. So I also work with cognitive scientists in different projects. And so I learned a lot about humans and their possible biases. What I see as a very successful paper in an AI conference, for example, will be how we can use these biases, or how can we work with these biases and be able to make explainable AI. And the fact that you already work on that with processes, I think puts you in a very good position to look at black box models in machine learning, or kind of semi-transparent boxes, and be able to put the explanation on top of it. My point here was that since we already worked on human in the loop for more years than machine learning researchers, we have better understanding, and we can try and push this understanding into the machine learning. So for me, will be, if I get a good observation in process mining or process management in explainability, let's try and put it on an LSTM and see what works.
Thank you.
Thank you. Then the next question comes from Ahmed Awad. So the microphone is yours, Ahmed.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Avi, for the talk. my question is a little bit on a complementary direction. So you talked about how a PM can help with like more explainable or human-friendly data analytics or data machine learning. But what do you see as the challenges that these big data with their various V's bring to our process mining landscape of tools and techniques? So what challenges do you see coming from these different V's to our community?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So I can break it into the different 4 V's and try to position them also in the data lifecycle. So starting from volume is obviously we can collect a lot of data nowadays. So we can also collect a lot of process data. And there we run into the risk of creating useless models. So obviously we all know the situation of creating flower models where everything works. And there we need to develop techniques of how to untangle flowers, finding ways of doing it in the most reasonable way when we discover models. Some of these works already are out there, but it becomes more significant when we have the big data. Now, part of it is, choosing the right data, as I mentioned before, is an important element of it. What type of data should I put in? What type of perspectives should I put in? Machine learning algorithms and process mining algorithms are not very different from that, get confused when they get too much data and too many perspectives. Now, they can handle it, but we need to help them, we need to guide them. So that would be one direction. When it comes to velocity, as soon as we have real-time processes that we need to be able to retrain, I mean, if the model is already trained, then getting predictions is easy. But what happens if we need to retrain models? So if we get models on the fly that we need to create, if like in situations that we haven't seen before, like whenever we get a drift and we need to retrain the model, how do we do it? When we talk about variety, then an obvious way to go is what happens when we do computation at the edge. So process mining is not different from machine learning in the sense that a lot of the data comes from the edge of the network, from different sensors, and can be possibly processed at the edge. And then we need to think how that affects a process. So what happens if different parts of the process exist in different edges of the network? And finally, for veracity, we also need to make sure that the data that we get is accurate. So we may have biases that come from sensors, biases that come from humans, and we need to include this uncertainty into the analysis of processes. So these are just like 4 pointers that I immediately think about in the different V's, and I think that all of them will be an exciting ways to go about research.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. In the light of time, we will have time for 2 more questions. And the first of the 2 will be Beshit Bekamal. I'll unmuting your microphone, Beshit.
And thank you very much for your nice presentation. I wrote my question and I want to ask you that, as you have mentioned, in process discovery, we have used input log data to answer 3 types of questions, such as who, what, and when. But we didn't mention that where. As we can gather useful contextual information using location, I want to know that can location be the 4th dimension in process analysis or not? Thank you.
Thank you. So obviously the classification that I made is one of my own, and it's based on the many works that—
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me? Dirk, can you hear me?
I can hear both of you. So
okay, good.
Go ahead, Avi, with your answer.
Yes. So who, what, and when is something that is very typical to process mining logs. Obviously, spatial information is important, but in many cases it is considered as another perspective, just like maybe role. Obviously, by adding more of these dimensions and creating a generic research agenda out of it is a very useful direction to go. For example, if you combine both time and space and you go to the machine learning state of the art, then you will get like a model like TCN, which combines both the convolutional and the RTLS, the recurrent version of neural networks into one. And then this can be used, going back to processes, how can we use TCN in order to identify processes over space and time? This game between how generic the feature is versus how can you use it differently is the play-off between aggregation and data. For example, when you do recurrent neural networks, you don't specifically state the time, not necessarily, but you represent it by the order in which you feed it into the machine. When you use space, when you use filtering over in convolutions, you add the space in a generic form. So beyond the space and time, we can maybe think about situations that we face in our process mining world and try to put it more into a generic world, into the machine learning world.
Might be that we've lost Bashit halfway through your answer, but thank you for your answer. The final question will be by Wil van der Aalst. Wil, the microphone is yours.
Yes, so Avi, I still remember that in 2004, we were co-chairing the CoopIS conference. And I remember that I was trying to convince you that process mining was a very exciting topic. So I'm very happy that, let's say, 16 years later, you're giving a keynote on the topic. So my question goes, your statement that, so it's also on the slide, that the human in the loop and explanations are key. Of course, I fully subscribe to that. But if you look at, let's say, commercial process mining vendors, they are struggling a bit with the next step. The next step being, okay, people may understand the diagnostics, but what should they do? Okay? So I think that Salonis with the more action-oriented process mining is, let's say, one of the few examples. Don't you think that that is an important topic for the BPM conference, to not just focus on analysis and understanding, but also having the capabilities to actually change these processes?
Yeah, so thank you, Will. Definitely, this is an important aspect. My presentation is obviously biased into the need that I wanted to focus on the connection between machine learning and process mining. But when, for example, if you think of a vendor that is struggling what to do next, so one direction is obviously optimization. So you can enhance the model, you can change it, but even in that direction, explainable AI is an important parameter. And just as an example, if you think about tuning the hyperparameters and showing different possible worlds for a user, by saying, okay, this is what we have now, but note that you don't have to work too hard to bring us from point A to point B, while if you want to get to point C, the change of the hyperparameters has to be so abrupt that you will probably lose many other things. So if we are capable of telling the decision maker not only how they can improve the model, but how much effort will be needed in order to get the process into a better place, I think that we can combine both of the things, the explainable AI on one hand, and make a good use of it when we try to take a decision maker from the current point to a better place.
So, thank you.
And I have to stop everybody here because the next sessions are starting. Thank you, Will, for your question. Thank you, Avi, for the wonderful keynote and the many questions and answers given. I wish you all a great start into this part of the conference where we go to the different tracks. The research track, the BPM forum session and blockchain forum session are now lined up in parallel. And I know that both the research track and the forum session both relate to things that Avi just discussed. Explainable models, reflector models, model quality, human in the loop. I wish you a great day, a great conference, and see you in the chats all around.
Thank you all very much.